Hello, hello, and welcome to another live session about the use of psychedelics. And I'm talking about the conscious use of psychedelics. If you don't know me, I am your host today. I am Dr. DaeEss Andrea Pennington Wasio. I am an integrative physician and psilocybin retreat facilitator, as well as a certified psychedelic assisted therapy facilitator. Isn't that fancy schmancy? I'm super excited that today I will be joined by my friend and my colleague, my co-facilitator, Jessika Lagarde. She is the co-founder of Women on Psychedelics, and she is a retreat facilitator and integration coach. She's been trained with Gabor Mate in compassionate inquiry, and we're going to be talking about our take on this whole world of using psychedelics to boost your abilities to succeed in business. And this is not without controversy. We're going to get into that. I think it's worth having this discussion with a couple of pros who are leading retreats legally, and we can talk about the underground and capitalism and all of that good stuff. So without further ado, I will welcome Jessika. Thank you so much for joining me once again.
Thanks, Andrea, and thanks for the nice introduction. I'm happy to be here again, talking about all the things that we love and the work that we do. So I'm curious to see what is going to come out of the session today.
Yes, I'm curious as well. We welcome comments and questions. You can type into the chat and we'll be happy to entertain questions. Well, the reason I bring up this idea of controversy is, being in this space now for several years, I happen to come to the path of psychedelics through the shamanic path, sitting in ceremonies in South America with indigenous folks. And it was really for my own personal healing. It wasn't that I was trying to have a business breakthrough. So I have a lot of respect for using these sacred medicines and allies for healing, for recovery, for getting into right relationship with oneself and with the planet. But over the last few years, I've also seen that these sacred allies can be used in a therapeutic context. So if you're not flying and sitting with indigenous, now there's the possibility of going on retreats or doing this even with a psychotherapist. And I'm actually grateful for that because in my work as a physician and therapist treating trauma, I haven't seen anything as effective as some of these entheogenic allies. And it does bring up a lot of questions around cultural appropriation and existing in a capitalist structure, even though we're using medicines that are really for spiritual evolution in many cases. So how has it been for you, Jessika? You are a Brazilian woman living in the Netherlands where psilocybin truffles are completely legal. You've been trained, you've got trauma-informed training behind you. How does it feel to be in this world as a woman, as a Latina in the psychedelic space and really navigating between healing retreats as well as retreats that just help people move forward in life?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And also like it has so many nuances and so much that I could say to it. Of course, coming from my roots, and the context in which the ceremonies happen in Brazil is really the shamanic context. Is really more for spiritual purposes or religious purposes. While here in the Netherlands, I have come in contact with these medicines from more of like, you could call it like a Western approach, in which it is the therapeutical approach. It is using these medicines and providing the ceremonies for people with an intention of bringing them some sort of healing that could be related to mental health issues or in a more therapeutical sense. But I also do not see these things as very separate. Like the spiritual healing for me, in my personal perspective, is not very different from looking for healing of mental health issues or personal development and all of that. So I think it's interesting to see like how we can use psychedelics and plant medicine in a more Western way under this type of setting, but also how can we bridge a little bit of both worlds, right? Like how can we do that in a conscious way, in a way that, as you said, we are not appropriating, but we are picking these medicines and also bringing them to the world in a way that fits our context and it fits our, you know, how can I say that? You can be a medicine guide from Europe and you can work with psilocybin truffles that are grown here. They don't particularly have history in terms of like being used by indigenous people and all. But you can be a guide in your ceremonial space. You can apply your own practices from your ancestors that might be from different places in Europe. And you can bridge different rituals and different tools that you have from your own history, but also the ones that you learn from mentors and from other spiritual leaders, and create this really unique way of serving, but that resonates with you, and that is not an appropriation or trying to do things in a certain way just because, yeah. I feel like with therapy, there's also like something for another juicy discussion, right? Like because there are so many guidelines of how psychotherapy is going to look like, how it should be done, and we know that in the ceremonial space we do have like certain ways of like regard certain rules. I don't know if rules is the right word, but like there are ways in which we handle touch, or there are ways that the space holding is done, but this really varies from the type of ceremony that we are leading, if there's more of a shamanic context or if it is more Western. So there's so much we can say about it. I
Yeah.
feel.
Well, I should let folks know that Jessika and I are co-facilitating some retreats in the Netherlands. Next week, it is the Sacred Feminine Truffle Retreat, only for women, and really working on body positivity and self-love. And then this October 2023, we're leading the Visionary Leadership Retreat for entrepreneurs and people really looking for a breakthrough in business. And I'm really happy that when we work together, we get to bring in that ceremonial aspect. Because even though I'm trained as a therapist and physician, because I came in through the shamanic path, and I know the power of ritual, I know the power of group energy work, that I wanted to make sure that when I started to facilitate, I was able to honor that. And so I'm really grateful for our collaboration in the Netherlands, where it's completely legal. We don't have to be worrying about being in the underground space. And I thought it would be also helpful to share, each of us, a little bit of our own experience. I've had two experiences that I'll share. One is with microdosing, and the other was with a full-blown psilocybin journey. And starting with the full journey, specifically as it relates to this idea of visionary leadership, I went into an ayahuasca ceremony, so it wasn't psilocybin. I went into this ceremony with a question. And sometimes we go in with an intention like, I want to see this or I want to resolve that. But I went in with this question, and it was, show me what blocks me in business. Now, for a lot of people who've been following me, they think, you're always doing great content, you're doing all this stuff. I wouldn't think you have any blocks. But what I felt was, I felt like I was doing good, but I felt like there was more that I could bring to my work or to my community, especially because since I stepped on the shamanic path, I didn't want to do business as usual. Like I wanted to bring more heart and soul. I wanted to bring more equity, and I wanted to bring more creativity, to be totally honest. But existing in this fee for service structure was a challenge. And so I asked that question, show me what blocks me in business. And as you can imagine, excuse me, as you can imagine, it was a very visual experience for me. and I saw a scene. And it was a scene of me interacting in a business context. And then there was this fear and this doubt that I could see. And I instantly was like, oh, yeah, you got it right. That is exactly what blocks me. But then there was another one. There was another scene that appeared, and I was like cringing. I was like, oh, yes, you're absolutely right. That is a fear I have. That's a block I have. And then there was a third scene. So I'm just sitting there going, okay, you got it. That is absolutely me. These are all of my fears, and these are my doubts and my worries. And then I asked the question, like, what's beyond that? And instantly I was shown another scene. And it was a scene of me operating in my business with more freedom, with more flow. And each of those three problems that I saw before were completely resolved. And in that, psychedelic state, I could understand how I could get to that version of me and get past these blocks. And I think that was one of the things that really convinced me that you can use psychedelics, of course, in this world where people are pushing like creativity and innovation. We see all the tech gurus touting how they've used psychedelics. Look at Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and the list goes on. But what I saw for me was I saw a breakthrough that was spiritual and psychological.
Yeah, no, I can totally relate to that. I had a client once, and it's a bit connected to this because what we are talking about in there is always the same fears and insecurity. They are always connected, right? So, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, inner critic. These are like the three big things that I would say like we all have it. But when it comes, to business leaders, entrepreneurs, like sometimes these voices can be quite loud inside of our head. And I had a client one time that came to work with psilocybin here in the Netherlands, and she was like, very successful, type A corporate personality. And at the same time, she struggled a lot with perfectionism. So there was some point in her life that she came up with like some severe anxiety and health issues, physical health issues. And basically, that was the intention while coming into ceremony here, was to look a little bit deeper into that and see how is the best way to perhaps address those issues. And what was really interesting about her psilocybin journey and the way that it unfolded, which is kind of remind me the story that you just shared with ayahuasca, but it was also her seeing and kind of experiencing how it was, her relationship to these fears and doubts and how that would play out in her life. And the way that psilocybin showed her that, because sometimes that's how it works with psilocybin. You want to say, show me how to be open, or show me how to don't be insecure. The journey at times will show you all the ways that you are insecure and not open, because you gotta go through that and understand that from another level that is not just here, in order that you can actually see, oh wait, that's not actually me, or that's not actually who I am, in order that you can release it and let go of those beliefs. So for her in that case, it was really about creating a new relationship and a new conversation with her inner critic, and seeing that the inner critic, instead of just being a really loud voice in your head that is always criticizing you, it can also be a really resourceful tool of data and information about yourself and actually your qualities. So if you learn how to steer that conversation, and I do think psychedelics, they give a window of opportunity for that, especially after the journey, then you start to see yourself in a different way and talk to yourself in a different way. And that can be super empowering and super useful for people that are leaders and who are trying to come with to this world or this system with a better relationship with themselves, so they don't get into the state of like getting burned out or yeah mm, feeling like they are successful from the outside, but in the inside they are struggling. And I feel, psychedelics in many ways have the potential, like to kind of point that out to us. Of course, the work and the change comes from our own selves, and that's what we put in afterwards. But they are definitely a catalyst for that, in the way that I see it too.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? You remind me of a study that was in the Journal of Contextual Behavioral Science, where they highlighted how if you combine mindfulness techniques with psychedelics, that can help to address these deep-seated feelings of inadequacy, which could potentially help with getting rid of imposter syndrome. Because, like you pointed out, most of us know that we have these feelings of inadequacy, but when you're in the psychedelic state and you're able to sort of drop in and either have a dialogue with that inner critic, like, why am I still carrying these feelings of inadequacy? Even though we can point to what happened in childhood or on the job or in school, why do we carry it? Like, there are these parts of us that are like frozen in time. And what I find is that when you start to bring mindful awareness, meditation, and breath work in the preparation and integration phase, because it's not like it's you just have this experience and it's done. Because yes, you may have a breakthrough in the psychedelic journey, but then you've got to do this work of integrating it, because you still will have these parts that are so used to acting, they're so used to reacting and doing what they've always done, that if you combine that with a good integration program with mindfulness, it can really help with realizing, of course, you carry these feelings that you were not good enough. Like one of my recent mushroom journeys, I got to a point where everything was super clear, and I was feeling like I had let go of like some limiting beliefs, and then all of a sudden I saw this like blank white room, and I could hear like little clicking, almost like a server or a computer. And all of a sudden there was this hand, and it was showing me a card with a program. And this being said, "This program is you thinking you're not good enough." And it was like, we can reinsert this into your operating system or not. And what the revelation for me was, is I had held the belief that I was not good enough based on what happened in my childhood, and I had to fight it. It was like I went to therapy, I tried everything, affirmations to make me feel like I was good enough. But it was interesting, because this little hand said, "This is not yours. This was a program installed and reinforced by life, by society, by the media, by the big, colonial paradigm that we live within." And what I recognized is I had a choice to not keep that program.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these are like the weird out of the box thinking that can come from a psychedelic experience.
Yeah, and that's such a interesting one, right? Because this belief, I'm not good enough, it's so we all have it in one level or another. I haven't had one client that didn't come to me with the same belief. So it's really something that at some point in our lives we kind of learn it, or we assume to be true. And I actually really I feel like this is also one of the key aspects, the most impressive ones for me personally in the psychedelic experience. It's really this point in which it doesn't matter how difficult a journey can be, or what intention you are choosing to work on, or what are the comfortable and uncomfortable emotions that might be coming during it. Always with psilocybin, especially at the end of the session of the ceremony, it kind of like shows you, wait, you are more than all of that, and here is actually your essence, and this is actually who you are. If you peel out all of those layers and all of those beliefs that and all of those voices that you internalize it and they are not necessarily yours. And that by itself is so powerful. And the question is, of course, how we can stick to that, or like how we can remind ourselves of that feeling after the experience and during integration. So this is why I completely agree with you, having a set of tools, navigation tools, that you can use regarding mindfulness, and support system and support from the guides of the people that have been there with you during the ceremony or your retreat is really key during this timeline, to actually make sure you are embodying that inner knowing and not simply going back to here and again the voices that are telling you that you are less than that, because we are not.
And that's exactly what I experienced, not with psychedelics, but with this out of body near death experience I had back in 2005. Like the intense perfectionism that I lived with, which created this constant need to prove myself. I was compulsively always seeking validation, always trying to get more degrees, know more stuff, to be seen as competent. And then having that experience in this expanded state of consciousness with what I believe is my authentic self, it was like, of course you're worthy. Of course you don't have to do all this extra stuff. And it took me years to really integrate that and to practice it. And I love that Ruth has asked a question specifically about perfectionism. She asks, what sort of intention would it be useful to set to address perfectionism? And could this be done with microdosing as well? So I love questions about setting intention. And as you know, I'm also a big believer in surrender. You can set it and then let it go. Do you want to answer first? If you were helping someone who really was struggling with perfectionism, how would we phrase that as an intention?
Oh, that's good. Usually, like the way I like to work for setting up intention is really about creating a mind map on the paper, in which I write down. It could be the word perfectionism or anything that is connected to that. Like I want to let go of perfectionism, and what I try to pull out of this mind map is all the things that are connected to it. So those could be emotions, those could be situations in my life that I remember that are connected to that. That could also be a version of myself without it, how I want to feel if I'm not so tied up to perfectionism. And I really try to see like setting up an intention as well. I completely agree with you. Like we should not hold on too tight to it, otherwise it becomes an expectation and suddenly you are trapped in the perfectionism cycle again of like, yeah, I gotta do this psychedelic experience in a perfect way so I can let go of being perfect. It's so interesting. I can even give I know it's getting a little bit out of the question, but I feel like it's important to share, because I had a client once that had exactly that intention of reviewing his relationship with perfectionism and where was this coming from. And his whole journey was him trying to do the psychedelic experience in the right way. And at the end of the experience, he felt like he failed to trip in the perfect way. And sometimes that's how the medicine really shows us. And I think like from the outside, the message can be quite clear as guides when we are there with the person and they are sharing about the experience. Other times it's something that really takes some time to land for you to understand what is exactly trying to tell me. So I feel, yeah, when it comes to setting up an intention with that, it would be perhaps for me, and I'm curious to hear, yeah, your thoughts on that, is show me how to be more connected with myself. Show me how it is to be lighter and not so critic And connected still to her question, I think this can be done with microdosing. It's an amazing tool for that, because different from the full high dose journeys, microdosing, you can have like a period in which you are intentionally trying to work and look into those matters every day, and really giving the space and time without the pressure of like, oh, I gotta solve this now in this ceremony or in these 2 ceremonies, but like, I have this time and space to be curious about this, or why am I like this, and I have this time and space to create behavior changes or to understand myself better emotionally on where is this coming from. And sometimes for some people that can work. It fits much better in their schedule and in their busy lives, because it's something that you can do like alongside your normal day-to-day life,
Right.
and implement changes during it. And for other people, like having a high dose experience or coming for a retreat can be the way to go as well. But I think both have different sets of benefits. Yeah. Yeah, curious to hear from you, because I feel like I went everywhere. Like,
Well,
not.
I love that you started with something physical and tangible with the mind map. Because one of the things that we do in the Real Self-Love movement and our Hero Collective is we create what we call a timeline of life events. So you can pick a problem, in quotes. So say I wanted to work on perfectionism. What I do on this timeline is to list all of the important times, these dates, where perfectionism really bugged me. Like I spent all night, or I didn't get a project done, or I have a lot of authors that I coach, and they're like, yeah, I've been working on this book for 2, 3, 5 years because of the perfectionism. So when you start to write it down and you can trace, when was the first time that this need to be perfect came up? Oftentimes you can trace it back to childhood. And as somebody else commented, Helen said, interesting to hear the experience, interesting to hear you talk about perfectionism, because perfectionism is a trauma response. And you're absolutely right, at least in many of the cases. For me, it was a trauma response. A toxic, abusive childhood led me to develop a part of me that tried to be perfect. I tried to be the good girl. I was always quiet. I followed the rules. My dad really enforced getting good grades, so I was always working on studying and memorizing and all of that. But it wasn't until my early 30s when I realized this is a trauma response, and this is something that I could heal and address. But by going through that timeline of life events, I went back and I found one instance where my childhood experience really strengthened the need to have a perfectionistic part, because it's just a part of us. You're not all a perfectionist. It's a part if you look at it from the lens of internal family systems. And so what I was able to do with a psilocybin journey is, my intention was, I just want to heal the little girl that had all these wounds where she built up these defenses and these behavioral patterns and emotional reactions. And so I went in this journey and I saw me as a toddler. And I've shared this before. I was about to get whipped. And I went in the journey, I was able to scoop up little toddler me and put out a hand, and I yelled so loud, "No." And I said, "You will not touch her again." And then I was able to tell little baby me, Dad got it wrong. Mom got it wrong. You don't have to be perfect. And what you did was not horrible. It was completely normal for your age. And it took a little bit of time and actually repeated ceremonies, but I was able to convince this younger version of me that mommy and daddy were wrong. Because, when we're babies, we kind of think mom and dad are God. Like, we believe everything that they say. And until you can convince these younger, tender parts of a new reality, that perfectionistic part, she was just there trying to protect my poor little exiled inner child. And so for me, the intention that I set was just, help me heal. And to the point that we said about, you set an intention and then you let it go so that you don't get so fixed on, it's got to be this. And this happened recently. I was doing a retreat in Jamaica, and one of the participants was like, I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it. And this is with psilocybin. And I said, what do you mean? Well, I hear this person's crying, this person over there is having a big release, and I'm not getting it. I got nothing. And I said, okay, well, tell me what you feel. Well, I mean, I see colors and I'm feeling light. And I'm like, so what do you mean you're not getting it? And then she explained, well, I had this intention that I really wanted to fix this one issue, and it's not coming up in my visions. And I said, okay, let's just breathe. Like, maybe what your psyche is ready for, and the mushrooms can tell, because the mushrooms are working with your psyche. Maybe what you need to do is just to be here with this feeling. And I started to ask her, I'm like, so, how does it feel that you're not succeeding in the way you wanted to? And her lips started to quiver, and she was like, I feel sad. And I said, wow, how does that feel to actually say that out loud? And she just broke down crying. And then she went and she had a breakthrough experience, and she was able to contact an inner child. And so it's one of those things that, yeah, you can have an intention, but if you hold it too tightly, it can actually create more resistance and more frustration.
Yeah, no, I can totally relate to that. I just came out of a retreat in July, in which I attended as a participant as well. And on my first ceremony experience, right on the beginning as well, my resistant part came up, and I was just like so angry because I was like feeling distracted by everything in the room, and I was like, this is not why I came here for. Like, I want to work on on this specifically. And one of the guides came and actually inquired me with a few questions as well. And there was a point that he asked me something that I finally understood. Oh, I'm just afraid of taking up space. And when that realization came during it, I also didn't stop crying for the next hours. So sometimes, yeah, like it's really like, but it's also interesting how the ego comes and is trying to protect you from something during the experience as well. And then because also of the medicine and of the people that are there to support this openness, and so that you can go there, it's beautiful how the experience can unfold. And yeah, I find really interesting, like, yeah, in retreats, how really the group context and the facilitator support really makes a whole difference when it comes to that. Then if you would be taking that at home by yourself, sometimes it's very difficult to get there and have this breakthrough. But when you are in a supportive setting, that can come so much easier.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I just recently facilitated a private ceremony, and I love doing private work, and a lot of sort of VIP clients will be like, no, I don't want to be in a group. But I really feel like you miss something. Of course, if you've got major trauma and it feels safer to just be with one or two guides, that's fine. But there is this added component to the group dynamic, especially when you hear someone else opening up and you're able to realize, oh my God, I'm not alone. Someone else has gone through that. Or it happens so often in ceremony, you hear someone crying or someone having a really difficult experience, and all of a sudden your own heart opens up full of compassion. And I've heard so many people say that that was a catalyst for deepening their own journey. And so when we talk about set and setting, being able to be in a group where you trust the facilitators, where you're able to just let go into the process, that can help so much.
Yeah, tremendously. And I think like that's one cool thing that we're going to have now with the women only retreat, and also with the retreat in October, is really about bringing up people. So for example, in the women only retreat, and actually in this group container, we can see that there are much more similarities than differences. also when we are bringing up different business leaders or people that we deem like, oh yeah, this person is much more successful than me, or you try to do a comparison and you put everybody in the room, you see that you all have the same inner chatting and you have very similar fears and insecurities. So I think there's also like a lot of power and a lot of healing that comes from bringing people together to have an experience like that in a more of like a community, way. And I do think, and I do fully believe that we all have medicine for each other. It's not just the medicine, the truffles themselves that are operating in that space, but there's always a little bit of medicine in each person of the group that is there for you. And that's the same for us as facilitators, right? Like every time I work with a group, there is always so much I get from the people that are there with me. And we are always mirrors for each other's in different ways. Sometimes we are triggers. Sometimes we are showing like the best of what I see, the best of me I see in you. So I really like the group aspect of doing this work. I think it's big, and healing is relational, and that's the best way to do psychedelic work.
Yeah, we are naturally community-oriented creatures. We heal in community. We recover together. Absolutely. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about neuroplasticity, because whether you're working on healing trauma and you want to create new pathways in your brain, or you are looking to become a visionary leader, or you want to transform the way you do business into a more heart and soul centered approach, I really feel like what psychedelics do with promoting neuroplasticity is worth talking about. For example, in 2018, there was a study that found that psilocybin promotes neuroplasticity, which allows for increased connectivity between parts of the brain that don't usually communicate, and unlocking parts that usually are stuck together, and allowing for new neural pathways. And when you hear people like Robin Carhart Harris talk about it, we hear that there's this potential to unlock creativity, to open up the mind to fresh perspectives. And for all of the nerds out there, they found in doing a functional MRI study with 15 people with psilocybin and with placebo, they found that they had decreased activity in the anterior cingulate and the prefrontal cortex. And that was really a consistent finding about the predicted intensity of what the effects would be like on a subjective level. And when they see that decrease, also with this uncoupling, these results, if you look at it into the analysis, they really imply that psychedelic drugs causing this decreased activity of some parts and increased connectivity in these brain center or hubs can really enable a state of cognition that's unconstrained. Like where we previously thought, no, there's only one way to do this, or I'm not good enough, or whatever. When you get into the psychedelic state, you have new connections happening in the brain. It's not just the visuals and the hallucinations, and then you get to reinforce that. We talk a lot about integration. The beautiful thing is immediately after psychedelics and for weeks, maybe even months later, we have this increased neuroplasticity. So anything that you're doing in the integration phase to take the insights that you've gotten and start to put it into practice, where you're starting to build new neural pathways and new connections, to be more compassionate, to be more creative, to be more trusting of yourself, enhancing your ability to do mindfulness or meditation or whatever the things are that you got as a revelation. It's going to be better for you to integrate because you've got this window of neuroplasticity. So that's for the fellow nerds out there.
No, and this is a beautiful period because I think still for people who are new to psychedelics and don't know enough about it, it's super important to reinforce how this integration period actually holds so much into it, or sometimes even more than the journey itself, because it's in that period of time that you have the actual chance to create behavioral changes or you can, you know, also slow down, or you can reevaluate certain things in your life. And if you have the right support and the right tools to do that, there is so much that can come out of that period. And it's, I really see it, yeah, as a window of opportunity. And again, it's a matter of giving yourself the choice, the agency, the time, and that by itself is quite empowering. I think like psychedelics just like show you and remind you of like, yeah, uh, you can do this, or you can do things differently, or actually you don't need to get stuck in that rigidity, but there are other ways and a new perspective or a broader perspective, like really zooming out and being able to see like, oh yeah, this actually could look a bit different than that. So i I really see like, yeah, when we do have the chance also like to come during the integration period after the retreat and come together with the people who were there and really have the support system, not just of the people you have back at home, but the people who were there at the retreat and share this experience with you, you kind of like give the strength to each other that you need to continue in this journey of like, yeah, self discovery or self improvement, but also to give, you know, the right words to show that you don't need to be constantly working on yourself. And sometimes it's okay to rest and just absorb what you experience. So, yeah, those are again like connecting with the group aspect, but also, yeah, with this beautiful window of opportunity. I think, yeah, integration is something that we cannot talk enough about it.
And I love that you're bringing up the idea of rest, because what I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs and business folks realize when they go on retreat, when they have these experiences, they realize that they have been driven. You know, like me, I was compulsively driven. And when you're driven from internal pressures, and then you've got this capitalistic, you know, egoic world that you're trying to exist within, and then you take a break and you realize, what am I doing? I remember in one of my own journeys, I got this very clear message. I was like super stressed, and I went into the journey with all this tension. And the message was so clear. It's like, you're trying to fit into this world that was made based on colonialism and patriarchy, and you've agreed to it. Not necessarily consciously, because as a baby, what do? You're born into whatever society you're born into and the family structure. But what I understood in that moment was that I could choose differently. And I think that's one of the keys, especially for people who are looking to do life or business differently, is that you can even reclaim your sovereignty. Like I came away, I don't know if you saw this post I did where I actually came back and I wrote a song called I'm Free that was all about sovereignty. But it really felt like so strong, like, oh my God, I get to choose. I don't have to be a part of this system or this paradigm. It was so freeing.
Yeah, no, I can totally understand that. And I had that in similar and different ways as well. But like this really, this agency and this empowering aspect, I feel like that by itself is super, super significant. Because, like, again, we are talking about psychedelics, right? And sometimes people might think, like, okay, these are like magic pills or like a magic bullet that is just going to fix me or show me what is like what is there to be fixed, which is another belief, yeah, that people might have, by the way. But it's really just again a tool that is there to remind you that you have it within you and the power is with you to actually live a different life or be more of who you are or lead in the way that you actually want to lead without all these external pressures or externalize or external internal things that you pick up for yourself. So yeah, I.
Well, we've got another question coming in. Dear Ruth says, I'm loving the neuroscience stuff. is it best to follow a particular microdosing protocol, Stamets versus Fadiman? Is it good to combine with meditation or sound? I'd love to hear your perspective on microdosing. I got started with microdosing thanks to where it's legal in Holland. I got some truffles during the pandemic, and I was super curious because I had just done a training on neurofeedback, which is where you hook up your head to EEG monitors, and through guided meditations or silent meditations, you can track your brain waves to see if you can get into an expanded state of consciousness. And since I'd been meditating since I was 20 something, I wanted to see if microdosing could impact my brain waves and my ability to get into deep meditation. And so I tracked it for a year. You can find a video and a blog about it on YouTube or my website. And I did notice that in the beginning, that increased creativity, that sharpness came. I started with a very small dose, and I was doing like 2 days on and 1 day off. And I always stress this. I tracked my mood, my energy, my sleep, my ability to concentrate. I tracked all of those things because I wanted to know what else changed. I could see my brainwave pattern changing. But one of the biggest takeaways I got during that point, well, there's two. There's two big takeaways. One is I noticed that I developed what we in Buddhist terms call equanimity. Rather than getting as ruffled or irritated by things, I found that I was more level and steady. I did notice a little bit of an increased mood, and that was important for me. Now, I started off with this like 2 days on, 1 or 2 days off, and just did that for a few weeks. But in the first week, I could tell that it was too strong for me and too much. So I eventually backed down. And so for people out there who are thinking you want to try the Stamets protocol or the Fadiman protocol, I've talked to Paul Stamets about it. I haven't talked to Fadiman, but I've watched a ton of his videos, and they both say the same thing. You start with the protocol and track your progress. And most people will find after 2 weeks or 4 weeks that you know your own brain and body, and then you can adjust. Maybe you only need to take it once a week. Maybe it's 2 days out of the week and giving yourself a couple of weeks of washout. So I would say, yes, have a protocol, track your progress. I did add meditation. I had binaural beats and special audio that I listened to just because it enhances getting into alpha and into theta, and if you're a super nerd. The second thing, and then I want to hear from you, the second thing that I noticed about microdosing, I had not expected this, and I've already done a masterclass on microdosing for menopause, but I was entering menopause, and I noticed, well, I didn't notice it. Actually, my doctor noticed it. Shout out to Dr. Jill Stocker, my dear best friend, who she heard me talking about it, and she was like, wait a minute, you're like getting other benefits. And then I started to do research, and I saw that psilocybin has some of the same effects that estrogen hormone replacement therapy has, with increasing blood flow, increasing brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which both helps to preserve cognitive function as we age. One of the things that people complain of with menopause is brain fog. And so it really led me down this path of researching, could microdosing help for menopausal symptoms? That wasn't my intention, but it's something that I found was a huge benefit for me. So how about you?
Yeah, I feel like me also with my microdosing journey, and I also want to reinforce that tracking and really monitoring how is it going, like has had a really big impact on the whole journey itself. So much different than just taking like the microdose every 2 days and like waiting to see how it goes, but really putting intention into it. Like even on the morning, the way I take it, the time I take for meditation, right alongside that, and during the day, tracking the mood. Sometimes I use it as a tool, also tracking my nervous system and what dysregulates my nervous system throughout the day, and noticing how that changes on the days that I'm microdosing and the days that I'm not. And really observing in this tracking journal what is working for you. Like sometimes you start with following a protocol, and after some time you notice this is not the right protocol for you. Perhaps for me, it's better to microdose on the days that I'm not having calls with clients, but days that I'm just working on computer, for example. And then it can be more of an intuitive process, which I think is pretty cool as well, because you are the person who knows yourself best, right? Like the protocols are just a suggestion, but you are the one who is going to define what feels right for you, and also tapping in more what feels right on your body, right? So you can adjust the dosage according to that as well. And yeah, it's a really cool tool also for people to work with microdosing after a retreat, or sometimes people do that in preparation for a retreat as well. So yeah, it's really about finding out what works for different people. Yeah.
And I host a live free call on the first Saturday of the month. It's called Sacred Psychedelic Saturday.
Mhm.
You should come and speak one time. And one of the questions that came up recently in one of the sessions, which you can watch the replays, anyone out there, you can sign up. The question was like, wow, I took what I thought was a microdose. It was just like 120 milligrams, so 0.12 grams. And she said she had a lot of anxiety. And that's what I noticed when I started microdosing. There were a couple of days where I started to increase, as some of the protocols tell you, and I just took 200 milligrams, but I was edgy. It wasn't quite anxiety, but it was edginess. And so what Jessika just said about really like listening to your own body, people will publish all kinds of stuff out there, but your brain, your body are going to respond the way that they respond. So just be sensitive to that. And you can always back down on the dosage. We don't have enough data to know, well, I mean, there are some people who will say we have zero data on microdosing, so you don't even know that it works. We have a ton of anecdotal evidence that it works. You can check out my masterclass on microdosing for women's health, where I share some of the data. But what we do know is that if these molecules are impacting our serotonin receptors, they're leading to brain-derived neurotrophic factor and such, even if we can't sense something, because a lot of people ask, well, I took a microdose, but I didn't feel anything. Well, you're not meant to feel or anything. Nothing's supposed to be weird. Yes, you may have heightened senses or sensitivity, but even if you don't feel anything, just know that they're working. It's like people who take multivitamins. Do you really notice that anything changes? Well, some people are super sensitive to vitamin C or vitamin D, but in general, you take vitamins, you eat healthy food, not because you're going to notice an instant effect, but you know that it's preventive, you know that it's maintenance. And for me, that's what I think of with microdosing. I've decreased to the tiniest amount that I take 2 or 3 days a week. Certain forms are different. Like if it's in a chocolate form, I find it makes me a little bit too loopy. So I take those at night before bed. I know other people that try with chocolate and it's too stimulating. So you get to know what works for your body, and then taking a smaller dose is not a bad thing. If you're feeling anxious, drop that dose.
Yeah, I noticed the same for me. I also work with a very small dose, sometimes alongside lion's mane mushrooms. And that's it. Yeah, it's interesting because, for example, in the days that I need to do some creative writing, I notice that if I microdose, it's so much easier for me to start writing. And we're talking about creative blocks before. And with the tiniest dose, it's amazing. But if I take a little bit too much, then I'm already like, oh, I'm distracted and want to do different things. So it's really about learning how to work with the medicine, and also, getting to know yourself throughout the process, which is, again, a win-win.
Absolutely. Well, Helen writes, would love to learn more about menopause and microdosing. Run a course for us. Okay, Helen. Well, I will add it to the long list of courses and things. I will say I do have an upcoming course on healing trauma with psychedelics in partnership with the Shift Network. So that's coming in a couple months. And Ruth asks, any evidence on whether it's better on an empty stomach or with food for microdosing? What's your experience there?
Because I take it in the morning, always. That works better for my day. I don't really know the evidence on the difference in an empty stomach or not, but usually the recommendation I do for clients as well is to be the first thing you take during the day before you eat anything else.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
take mine with a little bit of lion's mane in the morning with my green tea. So it's on an empty stomach. Because you're microdosing and you're taking a small amount, you shouldn't have an upset stomach. You know, for
Mm-hmm.
some people who are taking multiple grams, if you're going on a proper journey, sometimes there can be nausea associated with truffles or mushrooms. But with a microdose, I find that going on an empty stomach is fine. But no, we don't have any evidence on which is better. So you get to do your own testing and then report back. And Roller Girl asks, why lion's mane? Well, Roller Girl, it's great that you already use that mushroom. A lot of research out there shows that lion's mane is also protective of our brains. It can protect cognitive function and preserve neural connections. So it's great for that purpose. So why combining it? If you're combining something that's already improving cognitive function, and then you're taking psilocybin, which has similar but works in different mechanisms, there's this belief that you might have a synergistic or even better effect. And if you listen to Paul Stamets and you add in the flushing form of niacin, which is a B vitamin, then you increase the blood flow to your brain, and apparently the results are even better.
Yeah, fun fact with niacin is like it's a really small amount, and if it when you take it, you get so red and
Yeah.
fleshy. For some people, that might come as a surprise, but that's normal for just a
Yeah.
little bit of time.
Yeah. And it's for some people it's really not comfortable. So you have
Yeah.
to keep that in mind if you're really trying to follow the Stamets stack.
Hmm.
Well, this has been awesome, Jessika. Thank you all for your questions and your comments and being here with us. I'll remind you that if you'd like to join Jessika and me and some other amazing people in the Netherlands for the Visionary Leadership Retreat for entrepreneurs and folks who want to break through in business, we are leading that October 20th through the 24th. You can visit consciousevolution.live/retreats, and you can find out the information about the retreat there. We'd love to see you. There are still some spots open, and it can be, the chance for you to have a breakthrough in a really safe and well-contained environment.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Andrea, for the invitation, and always happy to be here and have this inspiring conversation. So
Yeah, it's definitely a joy and a pleasure to connect. I've been doing so much work solo. It's lovely to be able to work in collaboration. So thank you.
collaborations, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks everyone.
Yeah. So there you have it, my friends. We look forward to seeing you on retreat if you decide to join us. And if not, join us in Sacred Psychedelic Saturday or the Real Self Love Movement, where on the second Tuesday of the month, I host a live guided meditation and discussion. All right. So lovely to have had you here. You are most welcome. Thank you for all the sweet comments coming in. And yeah, we wish you much success and peace on your journey. Much love.
Bye
Bye.
bye.